Hello everyone, I am very glad that you're joining this story.
Subscribe, like, and comment. Enjoy the story, smile more often.
The wedding was one of those over-the-top family events that felt less like a celebration and more like a showroom for who had managed to outspend whom that year. I walked into the venue, an absurdly lit, fake Tuscan villa with pillars that didn't hold up a damn thing, and tried not to trip over the train of my thrifted dress. It was navy blue, knee-length, and cost me $19 at a consignment store 2 weeks earlier. I knew no one would comment on it out loud, but their eyes did all the talking, especially the women. And Carol's daughter, Lindsay, swanned past in something that looked like a champagne-soaked curtain, probably designer, definitely ridiculous, and whispered just loud enough for me to catch. Did she seriously wear that? I smiled politely, like I hadn't heard a thing, and kept walking toward the buffet table like it was the only safe place in the building. Which, honestly, it kind of was. There's something about wedding food that brings everyone down to earth. Even the most stuck-up cousin still piles prime rib and shrimp on a plate like a starving college kid once the food's free. I grabbed a plate, took a breath, and started making my selections slowly: potatoes, asparagus, a little Caesar salad because, God forbid, I skip greens in front of Aunt Carol. I was reaching for the carving station when I heard it. A voice. Familiar, rough-edged, and far too confident to be accidental. She's still living off coupons, isn't she? My hand froze in midair, right over the roasted beef, as if my body knew better than to react too fast. I didn't have to turn around to know who said it. Uncle Ron. Real estate tycoon, watch too shiny, teeth too white, soul probably made of foreclosure papers and expensive scotch. He was talking to another man, some golf buddy, maybe, but his voice was just loud enough for me to catch it. Not shouting. Just projecting. Like I was a footnote in a story he'd already rewritten 100 times. I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. I calmly finished scooping the beef onto my plate, added a dollop of horseradish cream like I hadn't just been gutted in front of a tray of meat, and turned to walk away. Smiling. Not the kind of smile you give a friend. No, this was the smile you wear when you've seen the punchline of the joke coming from a mile away. The smile that says, "Keep talking, old man." You have no idea. See, it wasn't the first time Ron had done this. Ever since I dropped out of grad school to build my app, he decided I was the family cautionary tale. The girl who had potential but didn't know how to follow through. At least 3 Thanksgivings ago, he told me I should marry rich if I wasn't going to get a real job. At the time, I smiled then too. I always smiled. That was my armor. That and silence. People assume if you don't argue back, you're weak. They don't realize it's strategy. I walked my plate over to a small cocktail table in the back, far from the glitzy centerpiece and whatever impromptu networking event was happening between the groomsmen and the venture capitalists Ron had probably invited. I sat down, crossed my legs, and took a bite of my asparagus like it was caviar. Because, let's be real, it tasted better than 90% of the forced small talk in that damn room. Across the room, I saw Ron laughing with another uncle, waving around a scotch glass like it held ancient family wisdom. Brad, his son, was holding court near the bar, talking about crypto arbitrage like he'd invented the term, even though the only thing he's ever successfully flipped is a jet ski on spring break. People were eating it up, though. That's the thing, confidence sells, even if it's hollow. Especially if it's hollow. I looked around the room and realized something else. No one knew. No one in that room had a clue what I'd been working on for the past 2 years. No one knew about the late nights, the ramen dinners, the near eviction last February, or the mountain of rejection emails I'd eaten like breath mints. They didn't know that the app I'd quietly built in my one-bedroom apartment had started getting traction. That 2 weeks ago, it broke into the top 10 of the productivity category in the US App Store. That 3 nights ago, a prominent tech blogger called it an elegant beast of a tool and predicted it would change the way creators work. That just this morning, I saw it trending in Germany and Brazil. But that wasn't the moment. That wasn't the thing. I finished my plate. I made my way to the exit, waving politely to my cousin Abby and avoiding eye contact with Ron. I got in my car, turned on the engine, and let the AC hit me like a shot of oxygen. The wedding was still in full swing behind me, but I didn't care. I was done smiling for people who only saw value in what they could measure in dollars or square footage. I pulled out my phone. Reflexively, I opened the App Store. Not because I expected anything different, just habit at this point. But then there it was. My app. Number 1. Not in productivity. Not in the US globally. Top app worldwide. I stared at the screen like it was lying. Like I had finally lost my mind or my phone glitched. I refreshed. Then again. Still there. Same spot. Number 1. My chest got tight, but not from fear, from something bigger. Something deeper. The kind of feeling that makes you sit still for a second because your body isn't sure how to hold all that joy. I laughed. Out loud. Alone, in my 10-year-old Hyundai parked under string lights next to a wedding I hadn't belonged at in years. I laughed so hard, I nearly dropped the phone. I didn't even realize I was crying until a tear hit the screen and smudged the top ranking. And right then, just as I was wiping my face and catching my breath, my phone buzzed. A message request on LinkedIn. From Brad. Hey, Emily. Hope you're well. Got an idea I'd love to run by you. Quick call sometime. I stared at the screen again, but not because I was shocked. No, this time I was grinning for real. Oh, Brad. You poor, clueless bastard. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I couldn't, but because I didn't want to. My body was tired, sure, but my brain was wide awake and sprinting like it had just guzzled a dozen espressos and chugged a gallon of vindication. I lay in bed with the covers up to my chin, screen brightness low, refreshing the App Store rankings every 10 minutes like a lunatic. Each time I expected the dream to end, some glitch in the algorithm, some bot surge, some tragic mistake, but it just kept holding. My app. My damn app. Sitting like a queen on top of the global leaderboard, ahead of TikTok, ahead of Spotify, ahead of things I'd grown up thinking were permanent fixtures in the digital world. And there I was, in a cheap IKEA bed with a missing leg cap, still smelling faintly like wedding shrimp and too much perfume, grinning into the dark like a kid who just cracked open a treasure chest. I had invested over 50,000 hours into the app by then, or maybe it was more like 5,000, but hell, at that point, it felt like 50. Every weekend I stayed home instead of going out. Every friend I slowly lost touch with because I kept saying maybe next time. Every birthday I skipped or forgot. Every ramen night. Every night I cried when Stripe sent me another rejection email for payments integration. This was the payoff. Not just the number 1 slot, but the sense that I wasn't insane after all. That maybe the gut feeling I'd trusted for so long was right all along. And I didn't tell a soul. Not Maya, who had been my rock and my therapist and my business partner in spirit, even if not on paper. Not my mom, who still thought I was just freelancing for tech stuff. Not anyone from that blood-sucking wedding. No Instagram post. No humble brag tweet. Not even a sarcastic meme in the group chat. Silence. Because this wasn't for them. Not yet. This was mine. Mine to hold. Mine to breathe in, alone, like the calm before a storm that I knew deep down I was about to unleash in my own quiet way. The next morning, sunlight poured through the window like an accusation. I dragged myself to the kitchen, bleary-eyed and a little dehydrated from adrenaline and too much laughing. Maya was already there, sitting cross-legged on the counter like she paid the rent, which she didn't. She was eating dry cereal out of the box and scrolling her phone with the kind of nonchalance only people who didn't have global dominance could afford. "You look like hell," she said, not looking up. "Wedding that bad?" I shrugged and opened the fridge, realizing I had nothing in there but almond milk and leftover Thai from 3 nights ago. "You know," I said slowly, "the usual." Ron made another dig. Brad talked about NFTs again. I didn't commit a felony, so success. Maya raised an eyebrow and gave me a slow once-over. "And yet," she said, voice low and suspicious, You're glowing. Like, weirdly. Like, psychotically. I gave her my best poker face and poured a glass of milk, sipping slowly like I had no secrets. But my hand trembled just a little, and she caught it. Of course she did. Maya always caught the cracks before anyone else. You did something, she said, hopping off the counter. What did you do? I just smiled and walked into my room, closing the door before she could pry further. I wasn't ready yet. I knew Maya would be proud, probably throw a full-blown celebration with dollar store confetti and half-warm champagne, but it wasn't time. Not yet. Not until I figured out what came next. I sat back down at my desk, the same wobbly thing I'd built myself with cheap screws and a hammer I barely knew how to use. My laptop sat open where I'd left it. A dozen Slack pings from a user community I had started 6 months ago, now completely blowing up. Mentions on Twitter. Tags on TikTok. Someone in Singapore had made a video walkthrough. Someone in France called it La Revolution Silencieuse. It was happening in real time, and somehow, the more it happened, the quieter I felt. Then, in that swirl of madness, came the memory that hit me like a punch to the face. 3 years ago. My first prototype. I'd put together a basic pitch deck, barely 20 slides, and asked Uncle Ron if I could get 5 minutes of his time. I wasn't looking for money. Just advice. Maybe a connection. Maybe encouragement. He met me in a hotel lobby, halfway through a cigar, wearing a watch that probably cost more than my rent. I sat across from him, trembling, while he flipped through the slides like they were junk mail. After 30 seconds, he closed the laptop and said, not everyone's cut out for tech. Maybe stick to freelance, keep your expenses low, and marry someone boring with benefits. That's my advice. I remember walking home in the rain that night, my shoes soaked, laptop bag getting heavier with each step, wondering if maybe he was right. If maybe the dream was too big. If maybe I wasn't smart enough. Now I looked back on that moment like it was a prologue in a movie that people laugh at later when the underdog wins. Except I wasn't done yet. I hadn't even started. My email notifications started piling up. Investors, journalists, competitors, fans. I closed the tab. One message sat at the top of my LinkedIn inbox. From Brad. Hey, Emily. Hope you're well. Got an idea I'd love to run by you. Quick call sometime. I stared at it for a long time. It was like watching a mosquito land gently on your arm after years of swatting at empty air. He had no clue. No idea what he was walking into. And the irony? It wasn't even his fault. He was just doing what guys like him always did, treating people like pawns, assuming the quiet ones were broke, assuming connections mattered more than competence. But now I had both. And he had no idea. Not yet. The message sat there like a dare, blinking quietly from the corner of my screen, as if it had no idea the kind of storm it had just invited. Brad's profile photo looked like it belonged on a billboard for a failed car dealership, tan suit, 2 white teeth, eyes dead behind the professional head tilt, the kind of guy who probably spent more time choosing that photo than building anything useful. I clicked the message, reread it 3 times, then shut my laptop and stared at the ceiling like it might whisper advice through the drywall. This was what the universe did when it was bored. It sent you the same old arrogance dressed in new cologne and expected you not to notice the smell. Brad. Of all people. The same Brad who once told me I should have studied something less geeky because women in tech have it rough, emotionally. The same Brad who asked me, at Thanksgiving 2 years ago, whether I ever thought about doing branding or whatever, since you're kind of artsy. Now here he was, sliding into my DMs like we were old colleagues, like he hadn't spent the last decade treating me like an unpaid intern at a party I never wanted to attend. I responded 4 hours later, just to make him sweat. Not with a full reply, just a neutral, non-committal, professional-sounding message that said, "Sure, happy to hear the idea. When works for you?" Short sentences, no emojis, no punctuation that could be interpreted as warmth. The kind of message that says I'm available but not impressed. He responded within 8 minutes, naturally. Said he was super pumped to chat and asked if I could hop on a Zoom call the next day, noon Eastern. Of course, he suggested a weekday midday slot, assuming I had nothing better to do because, in his head, I was still floating between freelance gigs and side hustles, sipping lukewarm coffee in a studio apartment while trying to land my next client. I confirmed the time, then immediately opened my notes app and wrote at the top in bold, "Do not laugh." The next day, I did my hair in a low bun, neat but unassuming, and wore a plain gray hoodie on camera, no makeup, no earrings, just vibes. I wanted to look like someone vaguely competent but not memorable. Like I could be anyone. It was crucial he didn't see it coming. I joined the Zoom call exactly 1 minute late, which I knew would quietly irritate him, because Brad was the kind of guy who valued punctuality only when he wasn't the one waiting. He greeted me with exaggerated friendliness, all teeth and eyebrows, and launched into small talk about the weather like we hadn't both grown up in the same exact state. I played nice, smiled a little, nodded when necessary, waited. He didn't ask how I'd been or what I was working on, just dove headfirst into his game-changing idea, which, as far as I could tell, was a rebranded calendar app with motivational quotes and a badass aesthetic, whatever the hell that meant. He called it grit, which made me immediately want to set my laptop on fire. He talked for 21 straight minutes, barely letting me get a word in. Kept referring to vague data and market research, but never cited a single source. He said things like, "We're gonna disrupt the mental wellness space, and the Gen Zs are hungry for this." He had no wireframes, no prototype, no dev roadmap. Just a Canva mock-up and what looked like a slogan he pulled from a motivational poster at the gym. And then, my favorite part, he leaned back in his chair, arms behind his head like a cartoon dish-a-bag, and said, "So, if you want to jump on board, I think we could really make something go viral." Obviously, no budget yet, but tons of exposure potential. I let a beat hang in the air, just long enough to make him feel like he'd said something profound. Then I tilted my head slightly and said, "Just to clarify, you're asking me to design, build, and launch your idea for free?" He laughed like it was cute. "Well, not free. I mean, obviously you'd be part of the founding team, and we'd have equity discussions once funding rolls in. My dad said you were doing freelance or something. So I figured this could be, a solid step up." My face didn't move, not a twitch. But internally, I was setting off fireworks, flipping tables, high-fiving every version of myself who ever cried into a keyboard at 3 a.m. because I didn't think I was enough. I asked a few polite follow-up questions, just enough to keep the illusion alive. I made notes, fake ones, nodded thoughtfully, asked about his timeline and how he planned to acquire users. He threw out words like gamification and community-driven like he was tossing breadcrumbs to a starving audience. I kept a straight face the whole time. I even smiled once. But the second the call ended, I hit that record button archive and took screenshots of everything, just in case. Not to blackmail, not to humiliate, just to remember. Later that evening, I sat on the balcony with Maya, sipping cheap wine from plastic cups and listening to her laugh so hard she nearly fell off her chair when I recounted the pitch. She didn't say, "I told you so," but her grin did the work for her. I didn't tell her I recorded it. That was for me. As the sun dipped behind the skyline, painting the buildings in gold like it had forgiven them for being ugly, I got an email from a name I didn't recognize, subject line, "Keynote Speaker Invitation, Private VC Event." It was an exclusive conference for investors, founders, and partners in emerging tech. I read through the email 3 times before I caught the detail that made my heart skip. The event was being held in Miami. The guest list included a curated selection of speakers. And among the registered attendees, Ronald Matthews, partner at Matthews and Sloan Development Group, and Bradley Matthews, independent venture consultant. I didn't smile this time. I smirked. The ballroom lights were dimmed just enough to create that manufactured intimacy people with too much money always mistake for soul, the kind of lighting that softens faces and hardens expectations. And I could feel it pressing on my skin like velvet-coated pressure. The chairs were arranged in neat little rows of importance, with name tags placed at strategic angles, like even the furniture was part of the hierarchy. I stood in the wings, waiting to be introduced, my fingers resting lightly on the card I didn't plan on reading from. Behind me, a tech intern nervously adjusted the projection screen, and somewhere to my left I heard a familiar cough, an entitled, phlegmy sound I'd recognize anywhere. Uncle Ron had taken his seat in the third row from the front, sitting just right of center so his head would be in every photo, his posture speaking fluent arrogance. Brad sat next to him, legs wide, scrolling through his phone with the same confidence he probably brought to every failed startup he ever consulted on. I didn't make eye contact with either of them, not yet. Let them get comfortable. Let them think this was just another presentation by just another speaker in just another overpriced venue with hors d'oeuvres that tasted like regret. The MC, a young woman with a clipboard and the enthusiasm of someone who still believed in professional networking, called my name, and the polite applause started. That restrained kind of clapping rich people give when they're unsure whether the speaker is going to waste their time or make them money. I walked out slowly, deliberately, not rushing but not dragging my feet either. I wore a simple black blazer, sleeves rolled once at the wrist, and dark jeans with no branding, no sequins, nothing to scream, "Look at me," just enough to say, "I'm not here to impress you." The mic was clipped to my collar, and for a moment the only sound in the room was the feedback-adjusted quiet of people pretending not to judge me before I opened my mouth. I started soft, with a thank you, standard stuff. I gave a nod to the organizers, made a brief joke about how networking events always felt like bad Tinder dates in bulk. A few people laughed, and that was all I needed. I moved into the story, not the app yet, not the success, not the flashy slide that would come later, but the beginning. I talked about rejection, about building something with no team, no funding, no roadmap, but stubbornness. I told them about pitching to empty rooms, getting ghosted by angel investors, watching my bank account dip below $20 more than once, while still pretending everything was fine. I didn't cry. I didn't even raise my voice. I let the weight of my words do the heavy lifting. I didn't name names, but I painted pictures vivid enough for people to color in the rest. I talked about being told I wasn't serious, that I was too quiet, too artsy, too soft-spoken to lead anything that mattered, that I should find something more sustainable, maybe work in support or marketing, that technical leadership might not be the best fit. I didn't say Ron's name, but I described a conversation over cigars and scotch in a lobby while a man twice my age gave me financial advice he wouldn't follow himself. I didn't say Brad's name, but I described a startup pitch where buzzwords were stacked like cheap Lego bricks and I was asked to build the whole damn thing in exchange for exposure. The crowd had stopped shifting in their chairs. The rustling of programs and quiet coughs were gone. Even the guy by the projector had stopped fiddling. It was silent now, the kind of silence you only get when people are realizing they've misjudged someone and they don't know whether to feel ashamed or impressed. And then I flipped to the slide. The projector screen lit up with a simple graphic. My app, its name clean and centered, beneath it a row of flags, 43, to be exact, each representing a country where it had hit #1 in the App Store. No confetti. No dramatic music. Just numbers. Just facts. The kind of numbers that didn't ask for validation because they'd already earned it. I looked directly into the crowd for the first time, letting my eyes settle just above Ron's head, then drifted to Brad, whose phone was now face down in his lap. Ron had leaned slightly back in his chair, hands clasped, his smile gone. Not a frown exactly, but that tense neutrality of a man whose ego had just taken a hit and was trying to calculate how loud a scene he could afford to make. I let the silence hang again, then said, "Sometimes, when people say you're not cut out for something, What they really mean is they can't imagine you doing it without their help. The audience murmured, some quietly nodding, some watching me with the wide-eyed stare of people realizing they might have underestimated someone and were now unsure how to correct their mistake without looking stupid. I finished my talk with a short story about the night my app hit #1. I described the moment alone in my car, under those string lights, eating wedding leftovers off my lap, laughing like a maniac because no one in the building behind me had any idea. And then I ended with it. The line I'd been rehearsing for weeks. Sometimes I said slowly, clearly, the best revenge is just becoming undeniable. The applause wasn't instant, which made it better. It built like a slow wave, starting from the left side of the room and crashing across the center, then hitting the back with full force. It wasn't polite anymore. It was real. And in that moment, I let myself smile. Not the fake one I'd worn through holidays and birthdays and family barbecues. The real one. The kind that said, I warned you. I glanced back to the front row, already anticipating the look on Ron's face, the tightness in Brad's jaw, the fire they wouldn't dare let escape in front of strangers. But Ron's seat was empty. Gone. Slipped out sometime during the middle of the speech, like a coward too proud to sit through the crash of his own delusion. Brad was still there, blinking at the screen, his mouth slightly open like maybe he'd finally realized the joke had always been on him. In the far corner of the room, I caught a glimpse of Grandma June. She didn't clap. She didn't cheer. She just gave me the faintest smile and nodded once, like maybe, just maybe, she'd known all along. The message hit my inbox like a lost dog looking for a home, all desperate charm and awkward phrasing, the kind of tone someone only uses when they realize the ground they've been standing on their entire life is suddenly made of quicksand. Brad's name lit up my screen again, but this time, there was no cocky greeting, no assumption that I'd jump at the opportunity to bask in his brilliant ideas. Instead, it started with 3 words that practically leaked panic. Hey, quick follow-up. That's when I knew something had cracked. I opened it slowly, sipping from a mug of lukewarm coffee as if I hadn't been waiting for this moment since the day I walked out of that wedding with a fake smile and a full plate of quiet rage. The message was longer this time, rambling even, and I could practically hear the sweat in his keystrokes. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. Said he was in a transitional phase and exploring new opportunities, which was rich considering the last time we spoke, he was trying to pitch me a bootleg app idea with a slogan stolen off a motivational Tumblr post. He said he'd been following my journey, like hell he had, and that he really admired what I'd built. Then came the kicker. I'd love to come on board, at any level. Just want to be part of something that's making waves. Totally flexible on title and compensation. Happy to grind. Translation: Daddy's money ran dry. The venture game is closing its doors, and the only person he can think of who's not drowning is the same woman he once asked to build his entire dream for free exposure. I didn't reply right away. I needed a beat. I needed to enjoy this for exactly what it was, not just a win, but a full-circle moment wearing a badge of irony so loud, it practically screamed. Maya found me sitting on the balcony again, the city buzzing behind her like a swarm of tiny failures trying to climb to relevance. She brought wine in one hand and a smirk in the other. I didn't even have to tell her who messaged. She just read my face like a headline. Oh my God, she said, plopping down beside me. It's revenge o'clock, isn't it? I laughed, but it didn't reach my chest the way it used to. The idea of taking Brad apart piece by piece had once thrilled me, had once felt like justice with teeth. But now? Now that I had power and leverage and a name that investors whispered in closed rooms? Now that I had choice? It felt different. It felt heavy. Maya leaned over, wine sloshing a bit, and said, "Please, for the love of petty women everywhere, make him your intern. Make him clean keyboards and fetch LaCroix and build Slack channels he doesn't have access to." I didn't answer right away because I was too busy thinking about what revenge really looked like when you finally got everything you wanted. Was it about humiliation or was it about control? Was it about crushing someone beneath your heel, or making them hold the damn door open for you while you walked through? The next morning, I wrote him back. Short, direct, cold. We could use some admin support on a trial basis. Part-time, no stock, no title, remote. Let me know if interested. No punctuation that could be read as polite. No offers of mentorship. No fake sweetness to make it go down easier. Just the offer. Simple and sharp as glass. His reply came within 10 minutes. He said he was thrilled. Said he was grateful for the opportunity. Said he wouldn't let me down. I forwarded the offer to HR with a subject line that read, "Add new temp. Minimal access." That week, I watched him join Slack under the name Brad_M. I watched him try to contribute in a thread about scheduling and get ignored. I watched him suggest a feature idea and get gently redirected to someone else. I watched him submit 3 different calendar invites for a team that never invited him back. And I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Sometimes silence speaks louder than rage, sharper than sarcasm, more devastating than 100 I told you so's wrapped in digital gold. My company was growing. We were in talks with 2 major platforms about strategic partnerships. VC money was circling like vultures with briefcases. I had meetings with execs who used to ignore my emails. I had rooms waiting for me to speak. I had leverage people would kill for. And Brad? He was organizing Zoom links for a founder he once laughed at. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt like I'd climbed the final step of a mountain that once crushed me under its weight. But as I sat alone that night, back at my apartment, the hum of the fridge filling the silence like a slow-ticking clock, I felt something else. Not guilt exactly, but a chill. My phone buzzed again. A text from my mother, out of the blue. She hadn't messaged me in weeks, not since she'd found out I skipped another family gathering to take a call with a European investor. The message was only 7 words. "You're becoming just like him, you know." It hit like a slap, quiet but surgical, slicing through the moment with a kind of precision only a mother could wield. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I thought she was right, but because I wasn't entirely sure she was wrong.